Good morning, everyone. I'm Jenny McGarry, and on behalf of UConn's Neag School of Education, I'd like to welcome you to a celebration of Eli Wolff. I appreciate the folks behind the scenes who have helped out putting today's event together, both from UConn and the planning committee across the world, and also to all of you for turning out to honor Eli's life and work. I first met Eli in 2004 at a conference on sport and community at the University of Notre Dame. I was only 2 years into my position at UConn and had begun working with a few community organizations in Hartford, connecting UConn students and local youth around sport. Eli's energy and his passion for sport was clear to me from the start. He continued to stay in contact, and I learned more about his work and that of his colleagues at Sport and Society and later at the Fitzgerald Youth Sports Institute. I credit Eli and those colleagues with providing me a vision for what would later become Husky Nutrition and Sport, an organization that I've run now for almost 20 years. Eli and I presented at conferences together. We spoke at events that the other one organized. I even spent a semester working with him at Northeastern as part of a sabbatical from UConn. I can't even begin to list all of the people I met because of Eli and all of the experiences I've had thanks to him. John Carlos and Tommy Smith, the Muhammad Ali Center, and Ted Fay. Clearly, I hold Ted in good company. And so many of you here today. Eli's personality, his spirit of collaboration, and his tenacious approach to changing sport for the better brought all of us together. I can still vividly remember the day that I met Eli at the Starbucks in Newton Center in 2019, July of 2019, when he was exploring professional next steps, and I was looking for professors of practice at UConn to support students in our sport management program. So much that Eli and I had discussed over the years came together that day. Eli became part of the UConn sport management faculty, teaching an international sport and social justice course, connecting with our Human Rights Center, advising undergrad students, and really advocating for them in the ways that only Eli can do. And eventually he led our Beyond the Field Speakers series with his exceptional virtual event planning skills. I was looking back at texts this week and I came across some from the Ali Forum in July of 2020. Eli was recounting the many powerful moments from the forum and how the event had just come together. Wild, he said. And I told him it wasn't wild, that he had worked damn hard for all of it to just come together. He went on to say, it was all a bit crazy running the event from my basement. The Ali Center didn't think they had anyone who knew how to do it, and I was so nervous, especially that first day of the forum. Then Eli elaborated on how he messed up a video transition and how he came off mute when he wasn't supposed to. I talked him down, and eventually he made a joke in typical Eli fashion that at least the video he messed up was from somebody else from UConn and they would just get over it. Then he shifted the conversation quickly to share that Spencer had reached a milestone that very same day and sent me a video of Spencer crawling to grab a ball. I think the milestone was the crawling, not the reaching for the ball, but it easily could have been either. And to me, that is Eli. One moment coordinating a huge global virtual event, not even 4 months into the pandemic, when so many of us were inexperienced with even a simple video meeting, to the next moment, sharing the joy he felt being a parent. I remember another time after a conference at Northeastern when I invited a group of folks to my house for dinner. At the time, there was no Stella, no Spencer, or even an Eli and Sherry. My 4 kids were all under the age of 8, and I was planning to grill outside and have kind of a picnic. It poured rain, and my husband was stuck in traffic on the way home from work to help. So it was me, 4 little kids, 24 burgers, and large amounts of stress. Eli came into my kitchen and offered to help come up with a backup plan for the cooking or to help with the kids. In no time flat, there was food for a house full of people and 4 happy kids. And it was because of Eli. Eventually, I was able to laugh at myself for planning that evening and even consider that the next time I just order pizza. And to me, that's Eli too. He was able to jump into the middle of things and they turned out better because of him. He didn't sit back and watch when things weren't going well, and he didn't just offer solutions for someone else to implement. He brought his ideas, his energy, and his commitment to change to everything that he did. I count myself among the lucky to have met him, to have worked with him, and to have been his friend. And we are all here today because he has made such an impression on our lives. As we begin this program today, I'd like to introduce Ann Cody. She's going to speak to us next. Ann is a three-time Paralympian and the recipient of the Paralympic Order of Doctorate of Humane Letters from the State University of New York at Cortland. Ann, you're up.
Thank you, Jenny. I'm honored to be here today to talk about my dear friend Eli. April 28th carries great significance for the disability rights community in the US. The Section 504 regulations were finally signed on this date in 1977, 4 years after the Rehabilitation Act was signed into law, and 25 days after the longest nonviolent occupation of a federal building in US history, led by young disability activists. This year also marks the 50th anniversary of the Rehabilitation Act. This act was a watershed moment in disability history. Section 504 enabled Eli, Sherry, myself, many of you, and millions of others to attend our local schools. As many of you know, Eli was planning to launch a campaign today to establish a National Disability and Adaptive Sport Day in recognition of the 50th anniversary of the Rehabilitation Act and signing of 504. He reached out to many of you and brought you into this project. One of Eli's mentors and heroes was Judy Heumann, which is why he selected this date. He planned to honor her memory with this campaign. Unbelievably, Eli passed exactly 1 month after Judy passed away. Sherry and Eli had a special relationship with Judy. Sherry was Judy's on-call physician 24/7. Judy adored Stella and Spencer and spending time with them. She and Eli shared several talents in common. The word no was not in their vocabulary. They were both natural connectors. They knew everyone, and connecting others to their networks gave them so much joy. Our job now is to carry on their legacy and to continue their good work. It is now my pleasure to introduce Steve Raymond, who will be moderating today's memorial. Steve is Vice President of Accessibility at Charter Communications, former Senior Vice President of National Accounts for Disney and ESPN Media Networks, where he guided the launch of the X Games that featured athletes with disabilities, and also helped create the ESPY Award category for Best Athlete with a Disability. Steve?
Thanks, Ann, and good morning, everyone. I'm honored to be your MC and to be part of the memorial for Eli and to be with all of you who invested so much of your passion and energy to improve the lives of persons with disabilities. And all of you share a deep connection with Eli. My connection with Eli goes back over 20 years when I was at ESPN. I was on the content distribution team and also co-chair of the employee resources group at ESPN that supported our employees and families with disabilities. I was really pushing our network to cover all sports and including adaptive sports. One of those initiatives was to create a category that recognized athletes with a disability. We really needed a trusted third party to help guide us on the right and authentic way to recognize disabled athletes that would be respected by the adaptive sports community and Eli was that guy. He helped us start with a blue ribbon panel that knew the space and how we should market it to the disability community. I always loved attending the ESPYs and to spend time with the adaptive athletes that were nominated, and spending time with Eli as he would bring aspiring athletes to the event, and his energy was infectious and the category grew. I know you'll hear this theme throughout the morning, but Eli knew how to connect people with a passion for a greater outcome. Now I'd like to introduce Eli's wife, Sherry Blowin. Sherry.
Great. Thank you, Steve. To everyone who has joined us today, first and foremost, I want to say thank you. For Eli and I's family, thank you for being, sorry, I'm a little broken up today. To Eli and I's family, thank you for being a rock and a stable presence, providing Stella, Spencer, and I unwavering support through this difficult time. To the small group of close friends and colleagues who have contributed to planning this event, thank you for your thoughtfulness and dedication to Eli's memory. It's been touching and so deeply appreciated. And to all of you who have joined today and were touched by Eli, thank you for being here to bring your love and energy back to honor him in such a profound way. Although I don't know all of you personally, your presence is very meaningful. And if he loved you, I love you too. Given that most of today will focus on celebrating Eli's accomplishments and legacy, I wanted to focus my time on describing who Eli was when he was outside of the limelight. May 25th of this year would have been Eli and I's 10-year anniversary. And suffice it to say that over 10 years of marriage, you get to know a person inside and out. Eli had a profound impact on every aspect of my life and shaped who I am today. So who was Eli Wolff, the husband and father? Firstly, Eli was very funny. He enjoyed wry and dry humor and was often searching for the best and funniest videos and spare moments throughout his day. In fact, our common sense of humor was one of the things that brought us together as a couple. Endearingly throughout the day, as he found funny videos, he would curate them for me and send me only the funniest, typically over text or email. In the midst of an otherwise dull day at work, I would see one of these videos pop up, and it would always serve as a bright spot. He loved Saturday Night Live, but once we had kids, neither of us could stay up until 11:30 p.m. on a Saturday, so he would spend much of Sunday watching replays from the night before. Two of his favorites were SNL's Blowin playing an iceberg and talking about his version of the events when the Titanic went down, and Will Ferrell singing the Tight Pants song on The Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon. I encourage you to check these videos out, and while you're doing it, please raise a toast to Eli. One of the things that I love most about Eli was that he enjoyed the finer things in life. At his core, as you all know, he was very down to earth, yet he could step it up when needed, and he genuinely enjoyed it. He was always game for trying a nice new restaurant or splurging a bit for a night at a 5-star hotel. Yet he was also fine with the Motel 6 if it made sense and was convenient. This agility made him a great travel partner who was always up for anything and ready to have fun. Regarding travel, another lesser-known fact about Eli is that he would always get to the airport absurdly early. When we got married, I had an unfortunate history of arriving so late to the airport that I would often miss flights, so we balanced each other out nicely. His airport habits offered me a consistent way of teasing him, which usually went something like this. If he had an 8 a.m. flight the next day, at around 8 p.m. the night before, I would look at him and say, "Oh my gosh, Eli, isn't your flight at 8 a.m.? You'd better get going. You're cutting it close." Eli was kind to his core, yet he set and maintained high expectations of others. He had a strong moral compass and a sense of right versus wrong, and he wasn't afraid to use his voice. One day last fall, he was dropping off Spencer at preschool when he noticed that a car without a placard was parked in an accessible spot. Another parent was getting into the car, and Eli told him that he shouldn't be parking in the accessible space. The other parent proceeded to call Eli an a-hole and condescendingly said, "Sorry, sweetie," all in front of Spencer. Well, little did they know who they were dealing with. Eli took a picture of his plate and then reported the incident not only to the preschool, but also to the Wellesley campus police and to the leadership of Wellesley College. The other parent was reprimanded and was asked to write Eli a written apology, which he did. And there's now an increased presence of campus police on site every morning during the busy drop-off period. These seemingly small acts of advocacy multiplied over 45 years are a prominent part of Eli's legacy that will continue to impact all of us in positive ways. The only thing that Eli was more passionate about than sport for development was us, his family. For Stella and Spencer, he was the epitome of a present father. He would drop anything, anytime for his kids, whether it was a last-minute visit to the pediatrician or a change in the schedule for soccer practice. After Eli's passing, Spencer's preschool teacher, Susan, wrote a message to me with the following, quote, "I wanted to share a story about Eli's last drop-off at school. As usual, it was a really smooth and nice goodbye. Spencer always gave Dad a quick hug or wave, and Eli always told Spencer that he loved him. On this day, Eli stayed just a little longer because Spencer wanted to show him the crayfish. We have 3 pet crayfish, and Spencer had named one of them Peace and Quiet. Eli had a little chuckle over the irony of that name. For any of you who know Spencer, you know he's not peace and quiet. I just wanted you to know that they had that little moment together." This anecdote is just one example of the unwavering and unconditional love that Eli showed to Stella and Spencer. He was also the epitome of the doting husband. He was my life partner, my #1 fan, and was always every day thinking about what was best for me and my happiness. Of course, we had small quarrels and moments of disagreement, as every couple does. But underneath the surface at all times, I knew that his primary drive was to support and love me. Over the years, he voluntarily scaled back some of his career ambitions in order to care for our family, while I often served as the working parent, which is a rarity for many women with full-time careers. He was tender, loving, kind, and devastatingly handsome. And for the rest of my life, I'll always miss having him by my side. And now we come to the present. We've just lost Eli suddenly, and we're heartbroken. And I can't yet describe in words what it's like to have someone by your side in one moment and then literally gone forever in the next. And all this leads me to ask, why have we been dealt this hand and what can possibly come of it? The organizers of this memorial created this beautiful flyer, which used the phrase common purpose, common cause, common love. And this, my friends, is what I feel that we need to do in this tremendously difficult time. The best thing we can do, really all we can do, is come together around a shared mission that helps us to carry forward Eli's legacy. There are, I think, hundreds of people on this webinar, and together we can move mountains for Eli as he would have done for us. So I ask that you please listen today, be inspired by his work, and think about how you as an individual can have impact that may even bring you out of your comfort zone in either big or small ways. Additionally, in the coming weeks, we'll be establishing a memorial scholarship fund in Eli's name to support the work of emerging leaders in the field of sport and development, and in particular those who seek to explore and advance the rights of athletes with disabilities. We'll be sure to disseminate this information widely as it becomes available, and we ask all of you to please support this effort. With that, thank you again for coming today. Through all of us, I know that Eli's memory will live on forever. Back to you, Steve.
Thank you, Sherry. I mean, those are powerful comments, and we have an amazing lineup of people that want to share their thoughts about their relationship with Eli. Next is going to be Richard Lapchick, who is the endowed chair of the DeVos Sports Business Management, VP CEO of the Institute for Sport and Racial Justice, Director for Diversity and Ethics in Sport at the University of Central Florida, noted human rights activist, pioneer for racial equality, international expert on sports issues, and scholar and author. Richard?
Gabe, I think you have to share with audio. It's not coming through.
Eli loved his family. I saw such joy in his face the first time he introduced me to Sherry. Whenever he talked about his children, the joy was there all over him, brimming. He was a dedicated family man. Eli told several people that I was his mentor, but Eli was my teacher. I've spent most of my adult life fighting for people who were excluded and living a life of inequality. But when Eli talked to me about disability, he opened up an entire new world for me, made me think about an issue that I hadn't before thought of. And we started a program at the Center for the Study of Sport and Society with Eli running it on disability. The outpouring of love that we've seen from all over the world in the past couple of weeks since Eli's passing has been a testament to how much impact he had on the world as the teacher that he was. The loss of Eli is so impactful because he was so inspirational and so full of life himself, and he reached out to so many people in loving but persuasive ways. He was innovative and intelligent and above all caring. He would always go the extra mile. When I received the Muhammad Ali Humanitarian of the Year Award in 2021, Eli flew to Louisville to be with me and Ann that night. It warmed our hearts. When I saw the inspirational story of Oksana Masters on HBO Real Sports, I knew we wanted to honor her at our next gala. I called Eli to see if he knew her. He not only knew Oksana, but her mother and all the people that Oksana worked with, and we were able to honor her last fall. In his TED Talk, he read a book about sport and society. He said that it taught him about racism and segregation and sexism and homophobia. The one thing it never mentioned was disabilities. He was stunned by its exclusion because he spent his whole life working in the world where people with disabilities have been segregated, where they played before empty stands in arenas around the globe. Eli decided that he wanted to make sure that future books have a chapter on disability. In 2000, he learned about Olympism, and particularly this phrase that he's read and quoted all the time. Any form of discrimination in regard to a country or a person on the grounds of race, religion, politics, gender, or otherwise is incompatible with belonging to the Olympic movement. He said that phrase, or otherwise, was him. He knew that they were talking to him, and he became a tremendous advocate for the Olympics. In 2003, he worked at the United Nations on an international treaty on the rights of persons with disabilities. When Eli got to the main security point in the United Nations, he was stunned when the officer told him that the meeting was going to be in the basement. He said, here is a meeting taking place to give people their rights, and we're being put in the basement. He later found out that all UN subcommittee meetings were held in the United Nations basement, and it wasn't taking a particular thing on people with disabilities. Eli was a terrific athlete. He was on the national cerebral palsy team. He was in 2 Paralympics and 2 Pan American Paralympics. He was an even better human rights advocate. He was an innovator and a leader. He co-directed the Power of Sports Lab and co-founded the Disability in Sports International Athletes for Human Rights and the Olympism Project. He helped ESPN create the ESPY that honored a male and a female athlete who played their sport with a disability. He was able to get sports provisions into the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. He worked for Casey Martin, the golfer, to try to get access on the PGA Tour, a case that went all the way to the Supreme Court. He helped create the International Day for Sport and Development and Peace on April 6th of each year. That's an official day on the United Nations calendar. He co-organized Athletes for Social Change Forum at the Ali Center every year. As you'll hear later from baseball legend Billy Beane, he got Major League Baseball to change what had been historically called the disabled list to becoming the injured reserve list. He was a teacher. He taught so many people about disability and other human rights issues. He was a wonderful friend. Within 12 hours of his passing, I was receiving more than dozens of phone calls and emails and texts from his friends around the globe expressing their sadness at the tremendous loss that everybody had just suffered. Eli was a son who made his parents proud. Eli was a brother by blood for Ben and Phoebe, but a brother by passion for all of humanity, who he stood up for each and every person on the planet. Eli was a proud dad. Whenever we talked about Stella and Spencer, he would have nothing but wonderful things to say. When we were together, he was quick to bring out pictures of Stella and Spencer. Eli was a husband. I literally watched him transformed during his years of marriage to Sherry. He was so proud of her as a doctor, as an activist, and as somebody who cared about the world at large. In 2010, I delivered the eulogy at the life celebration of Darrell Williams, who many people in here know. Darrell was a legendary freedom fighter in Boston who was a high school football player, was gunned down by 3 white teenagers, and confined to a wheelchair for the rest of his life. Eli drove myself and my wife to the airport afterwards, and he said Daryl impacted me and thousands of others around the world. Eli impacted me and thousands of other people around the world. His messages and his power will live on forever because so many people here and people who couldn't be here today will carry that message and teach it to younger generations. The world was a better place because Eli Wolff walked on its surface.
Thank you, Richard. Next up is Candace Cable. Candace is Director of Community Outreach for the Disability Rights Legal Center, President of the U.S. International Council on Disabilities and Inclusive Education. She's a 9-time Paralympian, the first woman to medal in both the Winter and Summer Paralympic Games, 6-time winner of the Boston Marathon Women's Wheelchair Division, USOPC Hall of Fame inductee in 2019. Candace?
Thank you, Steve. Hello, everyone. Sending much love to everyone. Eli wrote poems. He wrote them on his blog page, Writing Down a Dream. During this memorial, a few of those poems will be read. Please take the time to visit Writing Down a Dream and explore what Eli wrote. I'm reading, I Drank Caffeine. This is the story of the day I drank caffeine. Listened to the music in my car, started rocking out, believing in something amazing. Spectacular existence, tropical nights, fancy cars, and disco beats. Posted on the 22nd of November, 2011. Back to you, Steve.
Thanks, Candace. Next up is Robert Stedward, Professor Emeritus Kinesiology, retired Associate Dean of the Faculty of the Physical Education, founding President of International Paralympic Committee, recipient of the Order of Canada, and an inductee in the Canada Sports Hall of Fame. Bob?
Thank you very much, Steve, and good morning, everyone. Eli was an indispensable and irreplaceable member of our Paralympic family. So this morning, we have a wonderful opportunity to pay tribute to this gentle, humble, inspired, compassionate, and yet relentless proactive crusader who made his mark in life through his unselfish contributions to his family and the Paralympic community he served so well, and by the causes of social justice, human rights, and integration he advocated and believed in so strongly with dignity, respect, compassion, honesty, tolerance, and understanding. Eli possessed an intangible strength that bore quiet yet profound greatness, and we have all benefited from the wisdom of his teachings. I remember well years ago when we created a special forum within the Paralympic movement called Vista 93, which gathered athletes, administrators, coaches, academics to talk about some of the common challenges and opportunities we have within the Paralympic movement at the time. And certainly, Eli became an integral part of that process when he became more involved with our family. As well, every time something came up within the Paralympic or Olympic movement at their congresses, you must believe that Eli was always leading the charge. And he always had time, along with Sherry and my wife Laura and I, to sit around a table and have great discussions, enjoying our favorite food, sushi and sashimi. So I would just like to say thank you, Eli, for impacting my life personally. And thank you for the contributions that you made to the International Paralympic Committee and our entire Paralympic family. And may you rest in peace, my friend. And now back to Steve.
Thanks, Bob. Next, we're going to hear a court-recorded message from Josh Blue. Josh is a professional stand-up comedian known for challenging social norms on taboo subjects such as persons with cerebral palsy. Josh was a teammate of Eli's on the U.S. Paralympic soccer team at the 2004 Athens Paralympic Games. Josh has sent us a recorded message, so let's roll that message, please.
Hi, everybody. It's me, Josh Blue. And as a comedian, I gotta say this is not my favorite type of public speaking, but here we are to discuss my buddy Eli Wolff. Eli was an amazing soccer player. At least that's what we told him. I gotta say, when I first tried out on the team, he was already a pretty established player, one of the higher members, and I was just watching him on the field my first couple of days, and I just kept thinking, man, if this guy is on the team, I have a really good chance, because I'm better than him for sure. That's not true. He's an amazing soccer player, and an amazing person, and an advocate for our community. And the thing I was drawn to is that mischievous smile that he had. I think we all know what I'm talking about. He just had a very good sense of humor. It wasn't necessarily dark, but he made me feel comfortable in my own body, making fun of myself and talking about the disabled community, in turn helping me to become an advocate for the disabled community as well. And just a spokesperson for soccer in general, disabled or not. And, you know, the teammates that we had were amazing. People like John McCullough, Josh McKinney. Those guys all were this big force that a little old me came on the team and just was in awe of, really. And I miss those days, honestly, and I'm honored that I get to speak and say, I miss you, my friend, and I'll always remember your very mischievous smile. So thank you for that. Love you, bud. Talk to you later. Now listen, also, this took me 87 takes, so please enjoy it, and I hope I can turn this off.
That's awesome. Thank you, Josh. Next, we're going to hear from Anita Mormon. Anita is the professor of sports administration in the Department of Health Science and Sports Sciences at the University of Louisville. She co-authored the amicus brief to the U.S. Supreme Court in the Casey Martin versus PGA case. Anita?
Thank you, Steve. I want to take you all back about 23 years. I'm in my early days here at U of L. I've shifted from practicing law to getting into academia. And one of my colleagues, Dr. Mary Hums, had introduced me to this remarkable self-effacing young man from Brown University named Eli Wolff. So at this point, I'd only known Eli for a very short time. And we get the first of what would become many phone calls from Eli, where he's had some sort of a chance encounter with someone that has created an opportunity. In this case, it was with Casey Martin's attorneys. Casey Martin was involved in a landmark lawsuit against the PGA Tour, and it became the first of its kind to apply the ADA to an elite professional sports organization. And that case had just landed in the Supreme Court. And this chance encounter that Eli had, he did what we've seen Eli do so many times. He just asked a question. Would you be interested in having an amicus brief from the disability sport community? And the attorney said, sure, of course. So what happens next, of course, is nothing short of a miracle. Eli needs a lawyer, and we have about 45 days. So I'm not sure if it was his quiet confidence or my naivete that prompted me to say yes, but I did. And with the help of my brilliant colleague, Lisa Master-Alexis, we would somehow manage to get admitted to the Supreme Court, write a 30-page brief in just over 45 days. Eli wrangled 9 disability sport organizations to sign on to the brief. He even negotiated a discount for us for the printer of the brief, because you can't just submit any old thing to the Supreme Court, right? It has to be printed in a very precise way, and he figured all of that out. So in December of 2000, we filed that brief. In 2001, the Supreme Court held in favor of Casey Martin 7-2. This moment was, it's truly a random opportunity to be in Eli's orbit at that exact moment, that he asked that question. It certainly changed the trajectory of my career. It certainly, that case, changed the disability sport community forever. We really will never know what influence that brief had. But of course, I don't think that was the point, right? The point was to give the disability sport community a seat at the table and a voice in the most important disability sports case to come before the U.S. Supreme Court. And so that's what he did. That's what we did. So back to you, Steve.
Thanks for sharing that, Anita. That's great. Next is Valerie Fletcher. Valerie is the Executive Director of the Institute for Human-Centered Design in Boston. She's also an author, lecturer, and international consultant on universal design. Valerie.
Thank you, Steve. I'm going to read one of Eli's poems called Art of Inventing. Imagining what isn't there yet, to see the possible, how to make it happen, make it real, staying up late dreaming. Thank you. Back to you, Steve.
Thanks, Valerie. Next, we'll hear from Janet Lord. Janet is Senior Fellow, Harvard Law School Project on Disability and Senior Legal Advisor, UN Special Rapporteur on the Rights of Persons with Disability. Janet.
Thank you, Steve. Good morning, everyone. I came to know Eli as a devoted father of Stella and Spencer, loving husband to Sherry, an athlete, and today as a poet. But I want to talk about his contribution to the field of international disability rights, and the role he played in changing human rights law for the better, and the mark he made on the now nearly universally ratified treaty, the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. Eli had a gift for relentless advocacy that pressed and molded, but never appeared pushy. He knew how to nudge law and policy constantly forward with an alacrity that never bristled. And he brought that spirit into every room. And that spirit was at the center of his extraordinary accomplishments. We first met in the arcane process of negotiating a human rights treaty at the UN. A very recent graduate of Brown University and an accomplished athlete, Eli was passionate about all things disability sport related. Kathy Guernsey and I met him first in the Washington, D.C. offices of the NGO where we worked. With him, a plan was forged that had him tirelessly advocating in the basement of the UN for the treaty to reflect strong language securing the rights of persons with disabilities to participate in sport, recreation, and play. Now, this was no foregone conclusion, for social rights are often relegated to the sidelines in human rights treaty texts. During the negotiations, Eli challenged medical model notions premised on the concept of the broken body, where persons with disabilities are benched on the sidelines from physical activity or excluded from spectating. Ideas that insidiously erode the potential for athletic and social participation for persons with disabilities and reinforce stigma. Eli recognized, too, the role of sport in fostering peace building and social mobilization. He worked during the negotiations among landmine survivor athletes from conflict-affected countries. And he saw that far from trivial, sport, recreation, and play are essential for realizing the promise of human rights. Due to his perseverance, the UN Disability Convention requires states to provide opportunities for participation in both disability-specific sport and recreation and in mainstream sport programming. It is the fullest and most detailed expression of the right to sport in any UN human rights treaty. Article 30, paragraph 5 was Eli's vision, and it was realized thanks to his tenacity and persistence. His advocacy made a difference in human rights law for the better. I am proud to have been his colleague, and I'm enriched by what he taught me. Back to you, Steve.
Thank you very much, Janet. Now we're going to hear from Chris Rockstatchel. Chris is a former NCAA Associate Director, the Office of Inclusion on Minority, Gender, and Disability Issues, and he served from 2005 to 2015 in that position, and is now the Executive Director of the Greater Hayward, Wisconsin Area Chamber of Commerce. Chris?
Yeah, thank you, Steve. To me, I'm so grateful really to even be asked to be a part of this tribute to Eli, and really even to be associated with Eli in any shape or form is definitely, it's an honor in my book. My primary connections with Eli were in the area of, you guessed it, discussing strategy and action of how we can improve, the lives of student athletes with disabilities. I recall so many phone calls and some in-person meetings as well with Eli, and they almost always included Ted Fay, which was such a dear colleague of Eli's, as well as a friend. And those two, I can tell you, were a powerful duo. Eli began to shape his advocacy by challenging the NCAA regarding student athletes with a disability as an intercollegiate soccer player, I know, at Brown University in the 90s. I know that he then transitioned his advocacy work from being a student athlete himself to being a leader in a new movement to get the NCAA to become more attentive to the issues of inclusion for student athletes with either a physical or a sensory disability. Evidence, and this will be lasting evidence of his work, was seen in his leadership in helping craft the Office of Civil Rights Dear Colleague letter, which came out back in 2013, January 25th, 2013 to be exact. And that amended Section 504 of the Rehab Act regarding the requirement of inclusion of student athletes with disabilities at both the K through 12 as well as the intercollegiate level. I know that later that year, he was instrumental in the organization and delivery of the first NCAA summit on inclusion of student athletes with a disability. That took place in October of 2013, which was a catalyst and led to the creation of the ECAC's Inclusive Sport Initiative, which took place from 2014 through 2017. So, Eli was relentless, I think is a good word, in all the best of ways, in his quiet but definitely powerful advocacy with our NCAA Office of Inclusion to create true institutional and sustainable change in intercollegiate athletics. And I just want to add, the Eli that I knew, I really consider a giant in our world. I read someone's comment, this was online, I think it might have been a Facebook comment, that they describe Eli as a quiet giant. I certainly think, and in my experience, that's a very apt description of Eli. Just the class, the humility, the grace that he exhibited in every interaction that I had with him was just so admirable. Even to this day, I know without even being conscious of it, I know that Eli has an everlasting impact on me personally, really to help make me a better human being. And I have no doubt that everybody that Eli's ever come into contact with, he's had that same kind of effect on. The other thing I just wanted to add, when I think of Eli, I think of someone that was always willing to step up, whether others were willing to or not. To me, that signified his life. And kind of finally, in closing, I remember when I learned that Eli was going to become a dad. I'm pretty sure I learned that through our Facebook connection, because at that point in time, I was no longer, I had moved on to a different role outside of the NCAA. And I just remember thinking, what an unbelievable dad that Eli is going to be. Out of all the roles and accomplishments of Eli in his life, I was certain that the role he would star in the most was being a dad. And it sounds like everything I've heard and everything I've seen, it sounds like that's very, very true. What a legacy his kids will be. So again, thanks for allowing me to be a part of this. Back to you, Steve.
Thanks very much, Chris. Up next is Linda Masenstream. Linda is a civil rights and disability rights attorney and author. two-time U.S. Paralympian gold and silver medalist in track and field. Linda served as Director of Sports and Accessibility for the 2016 Chicago Olympic and Paralympic Bid Committee. Linda?
Thanks, Steve. I'm honored to be here this morning to share a few words on Eli's commitment to equality for Olympic and Paralympic athletes. From the time I met Eli back in the early 1990s, when we were both training for the 1996 Paralympic Games, he was focused on bigger things. Of course, we all know he was a dedicated athlete, but he was also looking to a future beyond competition. He saw and experienced firsthand the differences in how Olympic and Paralympic athletes were treated, integrated, included, around the world and across the United States. And Eli was determined that the United States could and should be a model for integration and inclusion of Paralympic athletes, that we should showcase and celebrate the achievements of Paralympians the same way we did for Olympians. And most importantly, that we should bring Paralympians into the leadership structures, a place straight from the nothing about us without us mantra of the independent living movement. So Eli set out to do what Eli did best: advocate, organize, galvanize. And a focal point of that advocacy was integrating Paralympic athletes into the United States Olympians Association, the athlete alumni organization of the U.S. Olympic Committee. Eli pushed to include Paralympians in that organization and to change the name to reflect that inclusion. But he didn't stop there. He knew that Paralympians needed to have a voice in the organization, a seat at the table. So he worked to create that seat. And as a result, a Paralympic vice president position was created on the newly renamed United States Olympians and Paralympians Association board. There have been 4 Paralympic vice presidents since then on that board: me, Eli, Candace Cable, and Bob Bulk. And others will come after us to continue to represent the integration and inclusion Eli fought for. I'm eternally grateful for Eli's vision and for his hard work, but mostly for his friendship. I'll miss you, Eli. Back to you, Steve.
Thank you for sharing that, Linda. Next, we'll hear from Gabriel Mayer. Gabriel is co-founder and coordinator of UConn Sports and Culture for the Blind in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. He has been recognized for his pioneering work by the UN, FIFA, and UNICEF. He is a member of the Disability in Football Alliance, of which Eli was a founding member. Gabriel?
Hello, everyone. I'll read one of Elias' poem called Shine. Don't let the world shine around you. Make it shine for you. Shine for the world and let the world see you. Was posted in 31st December 2015. Back to you, Steve.
Thank you, Gabriel. Next, we're going to hear from Paul Hunt. Paul is Senior Project Manager of the International Platform on Sport and Development, otherwise known as Sports and Dev. Paul?
Thanks, Steve. I've worked for Sport and Dev since 2012, and me, Sport and Dev colleagues, and many others worked closely with Eli on the International Day of Sport for Development and Peace activities since the very first one in 2014. It's widely acknowledged that Eli helped to establish the day, which was the result of efforts by the sport for development sector and the Olympic movement. Eli played a crucial role in connecting the different actors involved and advocacy at the UN level, which particularly gained momentum from 2007 onwards. During this period, he was also instrumental in launching the Journal of Sport for Development, before serving on its editorial board and then its advisory board after it launched in 2012. When the 6th of April was established as the IDSTP, Eli established a stakeholder group to coordinate on activities and messaging, which kept in regular touch every year in the run-up to the day. He always lobbied for various actors to promote the day. He organized poster competitions. He set up International Day social media accounts, and he coordinated with designers such as Live Sketching to make sure that the day was supported by attractive imagery. He organised annual events and did so in his usual collaborative way in partnership with others, including a hybrid one last year with some attendees in New York and others attending online. This year, he led the organisation of a Looking Back and Looking Forward event to commemorate the 10th International Day of Sport for Development and Peace, which didn't take place because he sadly passed away the evening before. The thing which always struck me is that he did all this without being interested in personal recognition or promoting any particular organisation's branding. And because of this, many people wouldn't have even been aware that he was behind some of these efforts, I think. As many people have noted since he did pass away, he was very humble and he was a great example of kindness. So not only did he have an incredible list of professional achievements, many of which have been described through the tributes on this memorial, he was also a role model for what leadership should look like, and he'll be truly missed in our sector. Back to you, Steve.
Thank you very, very much, Paul. Next up is Mary Hums. Mary is a professor of sports administration at the University of Louisville. Mary co-contributed to Article 30.5 of the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. Mary has worked for Paralympic Games and Olympic Games and Parapan Games. Mary?
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Steve. And welcome again, everybody. You know, as we know and as we've heard, Eli inspired so many people in so many ways. But reflecting on his life made me think, who inspired Eli? Well, one person who did was simply known as the greatest, Muhammad Ali. That inspiration led Eli to formulate the idea of showcasing the power of sport through the words and actions of Ali. And what better place to do this than the Muhammad Ali Center located in Louisville, Kentucky. So Eli reached out to Marcel Perrant at the Ali Center and floated him an idea. He said, let's host a conference at the Ali Center celebrating athletes' voices and the power of sport. And so the Athletes and Social Change Forum began. The forum evolved from a relatively small in-person event to what is now a virtual event that people from all over the world can access. This summer, the forum will celebrate 10 years, and Eli would be so proud of that. The forum has featured an amazing array of academics, practitioners, athletes, coaches, visual artists, writers, musicians, but all people committed to using sport to promote social good. I'd like to use the voices of some of the longtime forum supporters and attendees who expressed their gratitude for this event. Marcel Perrant from the Ali Center remembered, the first Athletes and Social Change Forum was full of energy and hope. Eli elevated our thinking on the role and contribution of athletes toward social change. Susan Rail, a professor at the State University of New York at Cortland, said, Eli's desire to educate about various social issues in sport came from his heart. I looked forward to the forum each year at the Ali Center, a perfect location. Sam Parfit from the True Athlete Project reflected back on the forum. He said, quote, long may the forum continue. Long may we continue the work of sport for change and the work of inclusion, which Eli completely embodied. Powerful words about Eli, the forum, and the power of sport. Finally, Muhammad Ali himself once said, service to others is the rent you pay for your room here on earth. Thank you, Eli. We believe you have paid your rent in full. Let's go back to Steve to introduce our next speaker.
Thank you very much, Mary. Now we've got a pre-recorded message from Amy Mullins. Amy is an actress, model, and activist for women and disability rights. Past president of the Women's Sports Foundation, Amy is a past Paralympian gold medalist and notably was the first amputee to compete for an NCAA Division I track team at Georgetown. Let's hear from Amy.
Hi, I'm Amy Mullins, and I'm reading Eli's poem called Night. We stay up late, underneath a night of fire, desire, pure satisfaction, whispering such words as touch, feel, heal, all at once in smooth motion. Your soft dance, your romance, I feel your soul connection, time, energy, and emotion. With you, my heart beats, my feet slide and step magnificent, longing for your touch, your groove, your everlastingness, your tenderness. The night finds me and you happy and steaming, overwhelmed with transformations, revolutions, moments of creation, perfect, pure, and quiet.
Thank you, Amy. Next up is a message from Billy Bean. Billy is Senior Vice President of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, Office of the Commissioner of Major League Baseball. Let's hear from Billy.
My name is Billy Bean. I work for Major League Baseball at the Office of the Commissioner in New York City. My current title is Senior Vice President overseeing all diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives for the league. And because of that, I received a letter from Eli Wolff in the fall of 2018. And the letter was simple in its intention, and that was to ask for a conversation with me to discuss the opportunity to change the name of what we used to call the disabled list to a name that was less biased and discriminating to those living with other abilities or living with a disability. And as someone whose job is to focus on that, it was a very humbling moment to learn that lesson, that something like that had slipped by me, because I did not have that lived experience. And Eli, because of his credibility in his work, the simplicity of his messaging, his ability to teach me, I was able to communicate to our senior leaders, and we were able to make a change that will allow Eli Wolff's name to live forever in baseball's history. And it's something that is just one of the many accolades that this man gave to us, and the opportunity for us to recognize him in a day that is hard to believe that we are here. I was just getting ready to see Eli in Liverpool, England, at a United Nations initiative that's focusing on the goal of eradicating hate in all its forms across pro sports via social media or messaging in our stadiums, in our ballparks. Another hugely ambitious goal, but something that someone who was fearless like Eli would take on gladly. I'm so honored and humbled that I had a chance to meet Sherry, their children, Stella and Spencer, and the opportunity today just to share a few moments with you and talk about the privilege that I had to intersect lives with someone who has dedicated themselves to so many great causes. His relationship with UConn, Link 20, the United States Olympic and Paralympic Committee. So it goes on and on and on. And just know that for those here today, sharing in their grief and their support for Sherry and her family, and we will all miss Eli very, very much, but he will live on in my memory always. Every time we refer to the injured list in baseball, I have a little sparkle in my eye, and I think about just the simple courage that he took to reach out to us, and how we may impact lives and help people feel a little more connected to baseball and less disconnected. So my heart and much love goes to everyone here today. Eli will live on in our memory, and I send my sincere regards to all of you. Be well.
Thank you, Billy. I will now turn it over to Yannick Clutch. Yannick is Assistant Professor of Sports Management at the University of Illinois, a scholar activist focused on diversity, equity, inclusion, and social justice in global sport, a member of the inaugural Team USA Council of Racial and Social Justice, commissioned by the USOPC in 2020. Yannick?
Good morning, everyone. Thank you to the powerful testaments we've heard so far. I am truly honored to contribute to this memorial of our dear friend Eli. My section will be a little bit different because one of the things that I associate with Eli is action. And today we want to honor Eli's legacy by sharing some action items related to some of Eli's project that he was working on right before his untimely death. Now, I want to preface this by saying that if you know Eli, you know that what I'm about to share is only a glimpse into the many impactful initiatives that Eli was the driving force behind. Please know that we will send a follow-up email to everybody who's attending today with information on how to connect with us on the items I'm about to share. So we wanted to share three projects that Eli was working on. The first one being the establishment of a National Disability and Adaptive Sports Day to be celebrated annually on April 28th, today. This was supposed to celebrate the passage of Section 504 of the 1973 Rehabilitation Act, as we've heard before. And the goals of this project were to advance disability inclusion in all realms of sport, highlight the power and purpose of the broader disability rights community, and honor the legacy of Judy Heumann, now Eli Wolff, for their work to advance disability rights in all areas of daily life, along with the many other disability rights activists around the world and those of you who are on this call today. The second set of projects we wanted to highlight relate to Eli's lifelong advocacy in and through the Olympic and Paralympic movement, including advocating for the inclusion of the word disability into Principle 6 of the Olympic Charter, advocating for changes to IOC Rule 50 and Section 2.2 in the IPC handbook to allow for athlete expression on all matters related to human rights and social and racial justice, and convening human rights leaders to engage the IOC and other key stakeholders across the movements on the IOC Human Rights Framework, a process we just kicked off 10 days ago, which was really impactful, and Eli's presence was felt. Third, I want to speak to Eli's lifelong advocacy for disability inclusion in the NCAA, as have some already. Eli really had, more than 20 years of advocacy to create inclusion pathways for athletes with disabilities, whether it's a physical or sensory disability, in college sport, based on the 4 principles of inclusion for athletes with a disability that Eli helped develop. One of the key efforts that Eli was working on was establishing a standing NCAA task force focused on the inclusion of athletes with disabilities to institutionalize an NCAA commitment to disability inclusion. Now, I'll repeat what others have said, but my life has been so greatly impacted by my friend Eli, as I know that it has yours. Next, I want to introduce my friend, Dr. Ted Fay. Ted co-founded the Power of Sport Lab and the Disability in Sport Initiative with Eli, Dr. Mary Hams, and Dr. David Lake in 2000. He is a professor emeritus of sport management at SUNY Cortland, a former Nordic Paralympian, and a Paralympic coach. Ted, why don't you take it from here?
Hello, I'm sorry. I have to cue the card here. Hello? Hello, hello? Okay.
I can hear you. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone who has been able to join us today in celebrating Eli's life. It's very hard for me because, as you just heard, the journey with Eli started in 1999 when I got a call from Center for Study of Sport and Society, Rich Lapchick, and 2 of his colleagues, Art Taylor and Kevin Matthews, gave me a call and said, "Hey, Ted, you got to meet this guy." And I took them at their word and traveled to Boston to meet for the first time Eli Wolff. And to use a very well overused cliche, the rest became history. His loss is devastating, immeasurable, and I can't imagine the feeling in the crater in the heart of Sherry, Stella, Spencer, his parents, Ben and Phoebe. It's inestimable, immeasurable. So you just heard from Yannick about 3 of the many, many, many plates that Eli had spinning, his initiatives, the ones he would smile and bring us into his web. And it became magical. The work. We always referred to it as the work. And as you noted that this work spanned 25 years. We, have just seen a taste of some of the work that Eli left to us unexpectedly, tragically, on April 4th. So I want to share with you today an initiative that Eli was not responsible for, in a way, of being his own vision, his own mission, given his humility, his grace, the class in which he engaged all of us. So this was perhaps something that maybe some of you on this call, joining us today in this memorial, would be left with 30 years from now, 25 years from now. A chance to work with Eli, work with Sherry, work with his family, to aggregate his work, his magnificent work. So this is not an initiative of Eli's. This has to be an initiative of all of us. So what is it? We need to preserve, we need to work every day towards it, but we also need to preserve Eli's legacy. And this is a call to action of how we might be able to do that. The goal is to establish a permanent and accessible special collection and archive that honors 25 years plus of Eli's work. It also needs to honor the preceding 20 years of Eli's development that brought him into his work. The why is that we have to preserve and amplify Eli's legacy to Sherry, Stella, Spencer, his parents, his family, as well as activists and advocates for generations to come. The where? The intent is to create this collection to be housed at a university library of Sherry's choosing. In doing so, it'll allow everyone who wants to know, needs to know, should know, access to some of his treasures, some of his work. So the how is we need to mobilize a cohort of treasure hunters, you all, some of you in the audience today, who have been engaged with Eli for over 45 years of his life, to join our growing team to help identify, collect, organize, and codify his stuff. Next slide. So what is the stuff? The stuff could include, doesn't have to, but should perhaps, this is just a starting point, of things like correspondence, scholarly and professional articles, presentations, including PowerPoints, research, background materials, drafts of his work, official documents, memorabilia, photographs, posters, pins from his event. This is a shout out to Josh and others from the teams he participated in. Game-worn jerseys, for example, he wore. Scrapbooks, books, his poetry, videos such as his TED Talks, podcasts, and so forth. Stuff. We need to help each other begin to collectivize his stuff. So the treasure hunt has already begun with the creation of an initial bibliography of his academic and professional work. Leading that is Ariel Pankowiak from the Victoria University in Australia. Aiding her will be Mike Cottingham, professor of sport management, University of Houston, Josh Pate at Lees McRae College, as well as others, certainly Mary, David, and I, as we really reflect back and try to somehow organize, collect the stuff that Eli left with us, whether it's emails, whether it's notes, whatever it may be, collecting the stuff. So that's our work. That's our, for today, our last call of action. And with that, I want to introduce to you a friend, a very dear friend, Amy Farkas, Caragor Georgios, who was a colleague and dear friend of Eli's and an internationally recognized expert in human rights, sports, and inclusive development. Over to you, Amy.
Thank you so much, Ted. Thank you, Steve, for the wonderful moderation today. I know Eli would be so pleased you are with us. He always spoke so highly of you. Following all the wonderful reflections today, let us take a moment to pause and reflect. I invite you to take a few seconds to reflect on the first time you met Eli, the last time you met Eli, or the last time you spoke to Eli, or the people that Eli introduced you to. And I encourage you to observe and notice your feelings, and perhaps you're brought to a smile. Now let us come back together and symbolically hold hands as if we're all in the same room in a large circle. Let us acknowledge the light Eli shared and sparked within each of us, and commit to work together to advance justice for everyone, both on and off the field. I must thank the group of Eli's friends that magically made this memorial possible within a short time frame. Ted, Mary, Anne, Gabriel, Orly, Candace, Linda, David, Jenny, Danielle, and Mike. I also want to thank everyone that shared their memories and read poems today. I want to thank all of you that joined online from every corner of the world. We are a large group today. I'd like to especially thank Sherry and Eli's parents for giving us the space to remember and honor Eli in the way that felt most fitting to us. May we keep Sherry, Stella, and Spencer and their extended families in our hearts. May we remember Eli as he inspired a common purpose, a common cause, and common love. If you have not done so already, please consider adding a tribute for Eli on the virtual memorial. May Eli's life be a blessing. Thank you so much for joining, and I hope you have a great day. That's the end of the ceremony. Thank you so much.